All right, hi guys. This is our second note set, and in this note set, we're going to look at chemistry in biology with water and solutions. Again, you are writing these notes in your notebook. You're making sure that you have it all copied down, and you guys will have like a quick open note quiz at the end of this. After this, and of course, you could use the notes that you have. So make sure that you are writing down your notes. We're going to look at atoms. Atoms are the building blocks of matter, right? Even though atoms are small, they consist of subatomic particles called protons and neutrons and electrons. Protons are positively charged. Neutrons are found in the neutrons have no charge, and they're found in the nucleus of the atom, right? Electrons are negatively charged, and they're located just outside the nucleus. They have a negative charge overall. So overall, an atom is electrically neutral because the number of protons, you could see two plus signs, are usually equal to the number of electrons, the two minus signs. So overall, an atom is electrically neutral. Next, we have an element. An element is a pure substance that cannot be broken down into any other substances by chemical or physical means. The six elements that are necessary for life are carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur. And we're going to talk about these six elements from here moving forward till the end of biology because they are a recurring theme. We have molecules and compound. A molecule is formed when two or more atoms are covalently bonded together. For example, hydrogen gas or oxygen gas or nitrogen gas. A compound is when two or more different atoms chemically combine. So it has to be two or more different atoms, right? Compounds can be formed from different types of bonds, not just covalent bonds. So differences here again between an atom, between a molecule and a compound. A molecule must be covalently bonded, while a compound doesn't have to be. So all molecules are compounds, right? But not all compounds are molecules. Almost all the substances that make up living things are molecules. For example, lipids and water and nucleic acids. Chemical bonds, there are three main types of bonds in biology. Of course, there are more, but we're just going to focus on these three main types. All right, there's covalent bonds, which are the bonds that are formed when electrons are shared between atoms, for example, in water or in glucose. There's ionic bonds, which are the bonds that are formed when electrons are transferred between atoms, for example, sodium chloride, which is table salt. And then there are hydrogen bonds, which are weak interactions involving a hydrogen bond, involving a hydrogen atom and something like a fluorine or an oxygen or something like that. This type of bond occurs between polar molecules. So it happens even within water because within water you have your hydrogen and you have your oxygen. So you can have hydrogen bonds within water. They're very weak interactions, but they're very, very important. And they're interactions that, again, we are going to see throughout this unit, especially when not this unit, this course, especially when we talk about DNA and things like that, right? And polar just means that a molecule has an uneven distribution of charges. So you might find one end is positive and another end of that molecule is more negative. So the charges are not evenly distributed. Other chemical bonds, again, covalent bonds can be found between the sugars and phosphates in DNA, and the hydrogen bonds can be found between the bases in DNA. And this is going to be very important. Again, this is a diagram that I'm going to throw back at you in a little bit further down the road, and we're going to look more deeply at what these bonds are and where they are and why it's important. All right, so we're just getting a little bit of the chemistry out of the way so that when it's time for us to talk about it, we're comfortable with it. All right, so this is a piece of DNA and it's showing both covalent bonds and hydrogen bonds within the molecule. And in biology, we look at, the big picture. So we start really small, like we're starting now. We start with the atom and the subatomic particles, and we see that that builds up to form molecules. Molecules form the cell. Molecules form the cells. Cells form tissues, tissues organs form body systems form an organism, and then on the other side of that, we organisms form a population form a community form an ecosystem, and an ecosystem forms the biosphere, which is all living things on Earth. All right, so again, we just want to cover some of these things so that it is not foreign to us later on in biology when we're mentioning them again. Properties of water. We just talked a little bit about water being a polar molecule. Here is a little bit of what that means. So oxygen carries a negative charge, hydrogen carries a positive charge, and so water is said to be a polar molecule. All right, water is very important, obviously, right? Because more things dissolve in water than any other solvent. So water is known as a universal solvent. It's a solvent for many biological molecules, for glucose. It's a medium for diffusion. Again, all things that we're going to touch on later on down the road. Again, I'm trying to wrap this up in 15 minutes or less. So if you guys find that I'm going too fast, pause, write what you need to write, and then keep it moving. Water is less dense as a solid, so we're talking about some of the properties of water that makes it so important, right? So it's less dense as a solid, it has less density, and so ice floats, allowing fish and other organisms to survive in the winter as they continue to live and function beneath the water. So just imagine if this weren't true, if ice didn't float as it got formed, right? It means the ocean would freeze over and aquatic life as we know it would die in the winter. So this is a very, very, very important property of water, that it is less dense as a solid. Water has a high specific heat capacity. It takes a lot of energy to change the temperature of water, and this helps regulate the temperature in coastal regions. If you've had experience with a swimming pool, if like when we're coming out of spring and it's getting warm and you go in the pool and the pool is cold, because even though it might be a warm day in the spring, it's going to take a lot more energy for the water to heat up, right? And obviously, this is more important for the animals that live in bodies of water, that the temperature of water is being regulated. It's not just changing so drastically, okay? Next, we're going to talk about the cohesive and adhesive property of water. Water sticks to itself, right? This causes surface tension, which allows droplets to be formed and allow insects and leaves to rest on the surfaces of water. So, like, when you think back to something like the Jesus lizard, if you've heard of it, Google it. It's a lizard that can walk on water. And I'm sure you've all seen a lily pad on a water, or you've seen bugs that are able to walk on water. Water is adhesive. It sticks to other surfaces, right? And this results in capillary action, which is what causes water to travel up the stem of a plant and seeds to swell and germinate. So, if water didn't have this adhesive property, then when the roots suck up the water, it wouldn't be able to get to the tip, to the leaves, right, in order to do photosynthesis and other things, because photosynthesis is not happening in the roots, right? So the cohesive and adhesive properties of water are very important and very necessary for life. Um, Hydrophilic versus hydrophobic, again has to do with the cohesive and adhesive properties. Hydrophobic is when something is scared of water, right? Phobic, hydro, water, phobic, phobia, fear of. Philic means loving. Hydro again means water. And again, study those word parts, because anytime you come across a word that you don't know, knowing the root of those words helps you to break it down. So if something is hydrophilic, it means that it is able to stick to water. If something is hydrophobic, then it does not. Other solutions that we'll talk about are acids and bases. Acids are substances that release hydrogen ions when dissolved in water. The more hydrogen ion a substance releases, the more acidic the solution becomes. Bases are substances that release hydroxide ions when dissolved in water. Um, Again, the more hydroxide ions that are released, the more basic a substance becomes. Right? So, as far as pH goes, a low pH means that you have lots of hydrogen ions. A high pH means that you have lots of hydroxide ions. So a low pH is something that's acidic. A high pH is something that's alkalinic, something that's basic. All right. The pH is measured by the pH scale. Again, it's a measure of the hydrogen ion concentration, right? Low pHs are acidic, so your ones, your twos. It goes from 1 to 14. High pHs are basic, your 13s, your 14s, and 7 is neutral, which is in the middle. All right. You are acidic if your pH is lower than 7. You're basic if your pH is higher than 7, so 8 and above. And look at that picture, at some of the things that are examples of places and things that are acidic or basic. And note that water is right in the middle, which again is one of the things that is great about it. Pure water has a pH of 7. It's neutral. Buffers are mixtures that can react with acids or bases to keep a pH within a particular range. All right? Most biological processes carried out by the cell happens between 6.5 and 7.5. So in order to maintain homeostasis, all right, there are buffers in the blood that keep the pH at about right in the middle there at about 7.4. All right, if you've ever had heartburn, you take an antacid. That's because an antacid is a buffer that helps neutralizes the stomach acid so that you can feel better. Right? And that's it. Right? Make sure you pause if you need to. Make sure you have everything written down. I've tried to be as concise as I can with the notes. If you are not writing everything down, make sure you capture everything that you need to capture. All right, guys, I will see you at the live session in class. Goodbye.